post-traumatic transformation that happens, you never know when that happens. Some people, it's right away where they're like, oh my gosh, like this is my growth, this is my journey, this is my opportunity to like make sense of my trauma that I've been through and build something really beautiful out of it and like turn it around from something that's going to haunt me for the rest of my life to something that's going to like give joy and love to the world in some way.
Hello, love. Welcome to the Sacred Purpose Podcast, a place where we illuminate your innate wisdom and help you embody your soul's calling. I'm your host, Lisa Malia, midwife, breast cancer survivor, and mama of 3, turned nonprofit CEO and embodiment coach. We're each on a unique path to live our sacred purpose, but we don't need to walk it alone. Through the power of connection, feminine wisdom, and embodied leadership, we can elevate our lives, communities, and businesses. Each week, I'll bring you transformative stories, practices, and rituals to support you in trusting and following your intuition, creating space to live a life of sacred purpose with deeper clarity and unapologetic joy. As we reimagine and envision a new way forward. Are you ready? Let's dive in. We are so fortunate today to have this guest, Talla Kuperman, on our show. She is someone I got to know over the last year when we were working together and called to work on this book that is actually very coincidentally coming out at the same time as this episode. And that was in no way planned, but just shows you the power of intention. And sometimes the universe just has other ideas in mind and it all works out much better than you even imagined. So this is one of those cases where we didn't plan it this way, and yet it worked out far better than the way we imagined it could. Talla is such a gift, and her story is powerful. We are seeing the sacred purpose in grief and transforming stories into art today. And literally, that is what her words do. That is what her story does. And it's really a testament to everything that we do here on the Sacred Purpose podcast and the work that we bring out into the world as we go through these different parts of our lives that often don't make sense. You can't see the other side of it. And then many times it feels unjust. And she goes into that story quite deeply, honestly, and vulnerably. And it is such a gift to receive her words, hear her wisdom, learn from her experience, and see how that she has turned this into really honest, honoring not only her sacred purpose, but her brother's legacy. And so I really hope that you dive into this episode, you let these words heal you in the way they need to be healed, and learn from her experience. And maybe you'll be able to identify with or relate to parts of this story too. I think that we all experience grief in our own ways, even if it isn't the exact same type of experience, but maybe you've been through the range of emotions. And I know that this episode will support you in that process if that's where you find yourself at any stage of this journey. And again, this is such a beautiful, beautiful conversation. So I'm really honored to be able to share it with you. Talla Kuperman, founder of Love Talla, as seen in the Wall Street Journal and the Austin American-Statesman, a one-of-a-kind fingerprint jewelry line with a goal to spread joy and everlasting connection between you and the people who matter most. From a career-driven professional to a stay-at-home mom to an entrepreneur building a meaningful jewelry empire, Talla found post-traumatic transformation after the loss of her brother and bravely turned the course of her life to continue her brother's legacy. She has pulled herself through significant personal growth and accepted her life's mission to provide people with beautiful jewelry based on love and connection and the celebration of life's most precious moment. Talla, hello. Thank you so much for being here on the Sacred Purpose podcast. I am so thrilled and honored to have you as a guest today. I wanted to check in before I intro you. If you could just tell me a little bit about where you are today and how you're feeling and what you're doing, and then we can talk about sort of how you got there. But if you would just give us a little introduction about yourself and where you're at today for our
Sure.
listeners who don't know you yet as well as I do.
Sure. I'm Talla Kuperman. I'm the founder of Love Talla. It is a fingerprint necklace company where I design beautiful necklaces to celebrate your most cherished people or to commemorate your most precious moments in life. And I am incredibly happy to be here talking to you. And one of the things that I really want to discuss today is where I'm really coming from and how I even came to being the founder of such a beautiful and just love and joy provoking piece of jewelry that brings people so much happiness. And my hope from today is that somebody, maybe similar to me, someone who's been through what I've been through or who's currently walking in my shoes, here's my story. And actually, here's our story, because I feel like you and I have a lot that is parallel in a lot of ways, and that it affects them in a wonderfully positive way. And that's really my hope for our chat today.
I love that. And that's really, it's so true. I think you have a beautiful way of taking really difficult subject, grief. I mean, and we'll get into that more, and other experiences that you've been through. And even when I watch your stories about parenting and taking some situations where I would probably be really struggling, and you come at it with honesty, the struggle, but also with so much love, and somehow you turn it into joy and beauty and art and even humor at times. And I just think it's your gift, and it obviously translates into so much that you do. And then, of course, these beautiful pieces of art that you actually can create for people out of that too. It's just such a testament to the way you live and the way you exist, and taking something that is so challenging and really alchemizing it into something really beautiful.
Absolutely.
So tell me a little bit about your background before you discovered and created this jewelry, what you were doing before that.
Oh gosh, what was I doing before that? I was a ex corporate ladder climber. I had left a really beautiful career on the risk analysis side. I was an underwriter for large insurance companies. And like I say, I left it, but honestly, it was incredibly difficult to leave a career like that. I had to do a lot of unwinding of my self-worth that was tied to my career and my title and my income and all that stuff. And I became a full-time stay-at-home mom. And that was something that I never in my entire life imagined that I would be. I was always the career girl. I always had big career dreams. I, saw myself in the C-suite. I never saw myself as the chief suggestion officer of Zach's life, my husband, And
that's what I'm talking about. The chief suggestion officer. I've never heard that before, and that's actually hilarious.
And so it was quite a change. But I did that for about, I would say, I did that for about a year and a half, and I wasn't happy. And I don't think it's a lifestyle for everyone. I think it takes an incredibly special and strong and resilient woman to be a stay-at-home mom and still find, happiness and fulfillment and joy in that. But that wasn't my gig. I was itching to do something, I'm not saying bigger, but like something different. Like, yes, I'm raising a little human, and that's very impactful, but I want it to be impactful to the world. Like I want it to be outside of me and my household. And so that's what I was doing before I decided to go headfirst into an industry I know nothing about, which, ignorance is absolutely bliss when you do things like that. And it has been a wild ride. Very, very great. I am like incredibly grateful, but like also just brutally difficult. It's been quite a journey, but really I feel like I've been on quite a journey for a very long time, because what I'm doing now really started like 11 years ago. And before I dive into that, I got to tell you, Lisa, I read your chapter in our Conscious Way Forward book last night, and I found it to be so powerful. And I just want to tell you, you are an incredible human being. What you have gone through and the gifts that you have found in it and come out and then built to spread love and joy to other people. You're amazing. I mean, I seriously idolize you. That is just unbelievable. And the other thing that really touched me is, I'm going to go into my journey and my story and tell you how and where I found what I call my post-traumatic growth. But really, our stories are so similar because you went through a life-altering trauma. And what I read in your story was the point of view of my brother. And that's like how I connected with your story last night as I was reading it, because I'm going to tell you how I felt going through a cancer diagnosis and treatment and, everything that came after. But for me, reading your words, it was like I was in his body feeling his reactions to everything. And I just found that to be really powerful.
Wow. You're giving me all the chills and emotions right now. That's beautiful. I will try to speak rather than I feel like crying, but I need to get my words out right now. Thank you for that. That's, first of all, even for reading it and taking the time, but to really take it to heart and share it in that way. I never imagined it having that type of impact on somebody who's watched somebody go through a cancer diagnosis and then ultimately even lose that person that you love so dearly, and to be able to connect with words in that way and find them to be supportive and healing.
Yeah.
And that's a testament to the power of our stories. We never know how they're going to impact somebody, and they're such a gift. And I just thank you for those words, just for me, but also for our listeners and for you and for your story. And that's really what this conversation is about: the power of our stories and the power of adding to that collective wisdom and that comfort and nourishment that we can find in each other's wisdom and experiences and stories. So thank you so much for touching on that. I never saw that happening, and what a gift to hear your words today on that. And also just want to back up a little bit, because when you mentioned that first transition that you had, leaving your career to become a stay-at-home mom, and then realizing that you were still feeling this call to do something else in addition to being a beautiful, wonderful mother, that there was still something else calling to you. When we look back on these stories, and I find myself doing the same thing too, like those were big moments. It's easy to say, yes, I left my job and then I decided there was something more, and then here I am. But there's a lot that goes in. It's not easy. Like those are big moments. And you use the word unraveling, which I love, because you really do feel like you're unraveling. You're letting go of so much, and it's all starting to feel like it's coming undone. And you don't really know exactly how it's going to turn out. And how do you get through that? How did you navigate that?
Just all those big moments with how I changed.
Yeah, just leaving your career, not knowing exactly how that's going to go. You feel the pull, but it's just, it is an unraveling. And I want our listeners and even myself to really understand what that felt like for you, and what you used to support you in all that uncertainty.
Yeah, I would say that all of those changes were absolutely frightening, because it is major uncertainty. And I went into all of them. I had no idea what to expect. And being somebody who comes from a risk analysis background, like I need to have certainties. I need to have ratios, and I need to know like the statistics. And so that was really uncomfortable for me. But just like anyone else, you don't grow when you're comfortable. You grow when you're uncomfortable. And the first step into discomfort was leaving my career and leaving that like safety net of me being able to support myself and learning how to rely or allowing myself to rely on someone else, because that's not how I was raised. That's not my inner dialogue that I told myself for 36 years before I married Zach. And so that in itself was scary and difficult and had a lot of anxiety about it. But I would say that the underlying theme for the step from leaving the corporate career to being a stay-at-home mom, and then the step from leaving the, what looks like a very cush situation being a stay-at-home mom, but I'm sure many people know that it is the hardest freaking job in the world, and leaving that and launching Love Talla, was that I was doing something that was big, that I felt was bigger than my fears, or bigger than the uncertainty, and bigger than myself. And I was just called, I knew that I had to leave my high pressure, 10 hours a day working career in order to be able to focus on raising this little human being. And not all moms are like that. Many moms can multitask, but I'm not one of them. When I have something, I go full focus in, and I'm terrible at the multitasking part. And then once I got into the groove of raising my wonderful little human being, I was again called to something bigger than myself. And if I'm going to be totally honest, this calling has been with me for many, many years. I finally just grew the courage to do it. And that required an immense amount of mindset change, an immense amount of positive self-talk, and also just immersing myself in stories of other women who have done the same. I'm not saying other women who have specifically gone through post-traumatic growth and then found a beautiful gift within it, and then created something that is spread so much joy to other people, but just other founder stories of women. Like, my favorite podcast to listen to is How I Built This by Guy Raz. I love that guy. And so I would listen to I probably listened to like 300 of his interviews. And every single time I listened to one of those interviews, I used it as a brick to build my like wall of courage to finally even be able to tell somebody about my fingerprint jewelry idea, or, that like calling that was bigger than what I was doing at the time.
Yeah, I love that. I think like so many things in life, like that calling it's not going to go away. It's just going to get louder and louder until you can't ignore it anymore. And
exactly.
I love that when you found the courage to meet that calling, like what a beautiful, just another testament to answering the call. You did it at the right time. You did it when it was time to be answered. But I love that it's been with you. I didn't know that for a long time. And for it to finally, I use that term a lot too. Like sometimes, I don't always listen to the call, and just because they are uncomfortable. Sometimes you get invited by your intuition, your gut, by spirit, whatever you want to call it, the higher source, this calling that's calling to you. And it's new and it's different, and it can feel very big and overwhelming. And who am I to do that? I don't have any experience running a business or doing, for me, it was a nonprofit, and it's just, the call sometimes is just so loud, you can't help but answer it, because if you don't, for me, I started, I couldn't sleep at night. I was feeling restless. It started to really impact my body. And I thought, okay, I've got to do this thing. I've got to hit publish on this thing. I've got to say this thing, and found that actually gave me a lot of relief to just be able to finally start putting it out bit by bit, piece by piece. And like you said, building that courage to show up and see how to build it. Let it take form and give it life.
I personally don't think the universe allows you to ignore it. I mean, eventually it pushes you so far down the path of actually doing it that you're either left with no other choice because it's just so strong, or you've got this like almost delusional level of just like energy to put towards it, like, this is going to be so good for so many people, and you want to leave that wake of positivity in your path. And you came into this world, and when you're leaving this world, you want to know that you made such a big impact on it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Your courage bigger than your fear. Because like you said, at the end of the day, not doing it would have been far worse.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
absolutely. So do you want to tell me a little bit about, your inspiration behind the jewelry? I know we've mentioned a little bit about your brother, and do you want to tell us even about him and your relationship with him? Your unique perspective as a sister and somebody who loves somebody going through a terminal cancer diagnosis.
Yeah. I belong to a lot of sibling grief groups on Facebook. And I think that these grief groups exist because, in all honesty, when you lose a sibling, you're kind of a forgotten mourner. And not a lot of people talk about this. And I don't know why, but I read this post in one of our groups that said, in your lifetime, and you have a brother and a sister, right? In your lifetime.
I have 3 sisters and 2 brothers.
Oh my goodness, you guys are a big family. Well, the post said that in your lifetime, you'll spend 80 to 100% of your time with your sibling. And that's longer than with your children. That's longer than with your parents. And yet when somebody loses a sibling and goes through that grief, that I don't know if it's because so much of the focus is on the parent, because parents should never lose their children. And I'm not downplaying that pain, but so much of the focus is on the parent that the sibling kind of gets brushed aside. And I think it's really sad, and it's really wrong. And it's one of the places where I think society and probably the medical field kind of fails people like me and other siblings in grief that are like me. And I hope that somebody comes across your podcast who is a sibling in grief, and this really speaks to them. Because, and if I'm going to like pinpoint a specific niche, it's someone who has also lost a sibling to cancer, because that it's like a whole different level of trauma to go through that with your sibling. And really, it was kind of a shocker with Amir and I was always the unhealthy one when we were growing up, and he was always the like bouncing baby boy and never got sick, and I was always sick. And so it was weird when he started to not feel well, because that wasn't his thing. That wasn't his persona. That was my persona. If I partied like 2 nights in a row when we were in our 20s and 30s, then you could guarantee on Monday I'm sick in bed, because my body just couldn't handle it. He wasn't like that. And so I recall, he hadn't been feeling well for about a month and a half to 2 months. And I remember this scene. We were sitting down for a Mother's Day lunch at our favorite Persian restaurant, and the whole family was there. And I remember looking at my brother and thinking like, wow, you kind of look like a supermodel. You're so skinny, like you've lost a ton of weight. Are you doing okay? And he was like, no, my stomach still hurts, but I've been to so many doctors. I think he probably saw like 4 or 5 different doctors and specialists. And here's one of the things that I'm very passionate about. I think the medical field somewhat fails young people, because he had gone to so many doctors and told them what's going on with his body. And instinctually, he knew that something wasn't right. He couldn't eat. He was vomiting a lot. He had lost a ridiculous amount of weight. He didn't have energy. I mean, everything pointed to, hey, maybe we should take a diagnostic view of what's going on inside your intestines. But
absolutely,
every single doctor that saw him was like, look at you. You're this handsome young man. It's probably just reflux. Your diet is bad. Stop eating so much fast food. And they would just brush him aside. And I think that if I'm ever going to take Love Talla to the next level and have like a giving portion of it, which I'm really trying to noodle out and come up with now, it would be to give to a charity that empowers young people to speak up for themselves
Yeah,
in front
patient
of professionals
advocacy is
like that.
huge. Yeah. And I am
It's
so
really,
sorry he went through that. I see it so
yeah,
much in my community too. And, young mothers getting diagnosed with breast cancer, but being dismissed because of all these other things. You're young, you just had a baby, these are breastfeeding moms. It's probably just a clogged milk duct. And yeah, even though something's not right and just being dismissed, the power of advocating when something is not right in your body, and having a medical team that actually trusts and listen to you rather than dismiss you. It's so important. It's work that I do, so I totally relate to it. I can't say enough about it. And just same as you, encourage people, if you know something isn't right, you got to keep at it. And I'm so sorry that's the way it is, but it is.
it is. And honestly, I'm not saying like become paranoid at everything, but if your instincts are telling you something is wrong, you have to advocate for yourself.
Mhm.
And my brother, I feel like, was advocating for himself because he got a second and a third and a fourth and a fifth opinion.
Jeez.
But it was all the same opinions until my mother stepped in, the mama bear, and started advocating for him. And she was the one who got one of her doctors in San Diego to give him a scan. And when Amir was scanned, I guess that's where the trauma really, when you think back, how everything kind of came to be, that's really where the trauma began. What the doctor saw inside of Amir's body was a stage 4 adenocarcinoma of his intestines. Like, it was to the point where it was inoperable. Chemo was not going to save your life. And the doctor looked at him and said, "I am sorry to tell you this, but you have 2 weeks to live." And the doctor was like, "You should go home and get your affairs in order." And when I read your chapter last night, and I saw you at work sitting behind your table, and you got the call and you got the diagnosis, I was then in that doctor's office in Amir's body, seeing this doctor give him that diagnosis. And I just thought to myself, wow, that must have been such a scary, pivotal. I mean, how is a 30-year-old supposed to take that? That's insane,
Yeah.
And so that, I think about that, and I just think that that's really where the trauma started, was when I got the call from my mom that this is happening. And I can't even imagine what my brother went through listening to a doctor say that, But what I love about him, and the lessons that I learned through the way my brother lived, and then specifically the lessons that I learned through the way he died, was that he just was not going to accept that. He didn't accept it. He was like, 2 weeks? What are you talking about? I'm 30 years old. I'm young. I have this beautiful girlfriend. And, instantly, do you know what he went to? Do you know what he said to me instantly was, "I want to take a trip. There are parts of the world I haven't seen. I'm going to book my flight right now." And of course, at that point, you can't do stuff like that anymore. It's too late at that point. But it was just so beautiful to see him go through that realization. And it just told me, like, don't wait on stuff like that. Like, if you want to go to a part of the world and see it, don't wait on that, because life is so precious and you just never know what you're going to wake up to the next day. But one thing that really was beautiful to watch in him, and all his fear and his sadness and his grief about his diagnosis, was that he was not going to accept a 2-week death sentence. My mom was not going to accept a 2-week death sentence. And our sweet and wonderful friend, Rebecca, who was his girlfriend at the time, was not going to accept a 2-week death sentence. And that was when we really, truly went, into the battling of his cancer. And for a long time, like, we really thought he was going to be the miracle story, the stage 4 that then bounces back and shows all the doctors you weren't right, like, I've got so much more life to live.
Yeah.
And it was really hard to watch.
I think you touched on something, I mean, so many powerful things there, but the part that stands out to me right now in this moment is the passion for living and the passion for life, right? Like, we're not going to accept this 2-week death sentence, and we're going to live right now in this moment, and we're going to fight this, and we're going to believe in miracles.
Right.
And at the same time, you have this thing that's coming, right? Almost like a train that's coming that can't be stopped.
Yeah.
And yet living and believing in miracles and saying that it's possible.
Yeah. We all read a lot of books about the survivor mentality, and really that is the survivor mentality. You never actually think it's not going to happen. Like, you think that is your truth, and that was his truth for a very, very long time. And I will always wonder, what if that first doctor he saw 3 months before had taken him seriously, or like listened to him? Like, what if? And that was step 1 in feeling like the medical field fails young, healthy looking people. Right. Step 2 of where I felt the medical field fails young people going through cancer, and maybe you've had the same experience, is that you're now in the system and it feels like a whirlwind, and not a whole lot is explained to you. Well, it is explained to you. I think you just can't really take it all in. Like, it's just so, like, outside of your imagination that you're going to be now going through chemotherapy and radiation and everything that they do to try to save your life. But there isn't like a support, like a mental support. And I think that's one of the things that we were missing in the very beginning, especially when Amir first started his whirlwind battle in the medical field, was that I have this like very specific memory of him being wheeled back into his hospital room when they inserted his port into his chest. And, he was just kind of coming to, and I was like, how do you feel, with the port in your chest? And he looked down and he freaked out. Like, the like raw fear that I saw in his eyes of seeing like a lump coming out of his body really freaked him out. And I just, like, in that moment, I felt like, you know what, someone should have talked to him about this. Like, someone should have warned him, like, you're basically disfiguring your body in some way. But then in hindsight, it was so small compared to what came later,
But just being prepared for it, even knowing what's happening and how it's going to look, and to be prepared for that. I've experienced that myself after procedures. Like, wow, why didn't anybody tell me this was going to happen, right?
Yeah.
And feeling a little bit betrayed and horrified, and also just scared because I didn't know what it was.
Yes.
And ports, they sit right over your heart space. They're a big lump, and it does look disfiguring, and it stands out. And if you're not prepared for that, to receive that, and eventually, I know you can develop a healthy relationship. I know that some women, even in my group, were like, when the time to have it removed comes, they're like, but this is my lifeline. This is what's kept me alive for so long. How do I let it go? So there's even the fear of having it taken out, because now it's going to keep me alive, all this medicine that I used to receive. And you mean I'm okay now and I don't need it? So it almost becomes a source of security at some point for people. So the emotional process and preparing for that is huge. And you're absolutely right. There needs to be support around that. And even the diagnosis process, like you said, I mean, I remember being handed a stack of folders this big, here's some information you can read about having breast cancer. And, you know, you're in a trauma, you're dealing with the biggest trauma of your life. You're not going to retain and understand this information. You're trying to make wise choices for yourself, but you're getting all this information. How am I supposed to know what's best? I'm not a doctor. I felt, you know, even though I had all this support and a big family, I still felt very much alone and very confused and really afraid. It didn't make sense to me. And somewhere in that stack, there was a card for a nurse navigator that I never saw until my treatments were almost done. And somebody said, "Oh, you didn't have a nurse navigator this whole time? They could have helped you with all this." And I just like,
that should be the first thing that they drill into you, like
that
in
should
that
be
first appointment, you know? I
exactly.
totally agree.
Yeah.
And with Amir, it was like, you know, I went to almost every appointment that I could physically be there for with him, because he would sit in those appointments and he was not comprehending anything. Like it was just so outside of his reality that he's even going through this. So I had to be like the person who was soaking it all in and comprehending it for him. I wasn't even like, I was like freaked out that I can't believe I'm sitting in this oncologist's office talking about my brother's like terrible prognosis. Like, what is happening? What is happening here was like my battle cry for the extension. He took his 2-week prognosis and extended it to 1.5 years. And I give him all the credit. I give all the credit to his survivor mindset and my mom's caretaking. But most of all, I give so much credit to Rebecca. She, to this day, I feel like she is an angel walking on this earth. And I think that girl kept Amir alive purely with the amount of love that she showered him with. It was unreal to watch. It was so beautiful to watch. And I think he held on for her as long as he could. And, you know, there are so many beautiful gifts in his journey and so much trauma that just watching your sibling like wither away is just, it's, no one should have to go through that. But there are also so many lessons that he taught me and my family and his friends. And I mean, I could talk to great lengths about how he became okay with dying at such an early age. But when I saw that switch in him, I was just like, you are beyond what a human being is capable of. Like there's something really like above and beyond with him, that he was able to look outside of what he was going through, and he was able to look outside of tubes sticking out of his body and his quality of life being just garbage, and having this like ridiculously awesome life, and then the next day changing to a nightmare life. And yet he was able to pull something really beautiful and like a teaching in a way for the rest of us who remained to carry with us for the rest of our lives. And I'm still blown away. But it was incredibly traumatic as a sibling to go through that. And when Amir died, I mean, a piece of you dies with that. I'm not even a piece of you. You die with that. You don't survive that. And the person that I was before and the person that I am now are two totally different people. And I was really angry for a really, really long time. I was very numb. I couldn't really feel anything. I couldn't feel joy. I couldn't feel happiness. I couldn't feel who I was before. I couldn't feel anything really. But the one thing that I felt was freaking anger. Like, why did this have to happen to him? Why did this have to happen to me? Why is someone who was supposed to be with me for the rest of my life, why is that person just poof, like gone? It was outside of my comprehension. And I know this is all very sad, and I'm gonna tell you where it gets good
No, it's beautiful. I am
because I
here
think
for this.
a lot of people, especially now, I think it's very, many people are losing their loved ones right now, and I hope that this is relatable to them. But I was angry for like years, and I remember it must have been about 5, 6 years in after I lost Amir. Rebecca and I had lost touch, but we reconnected. And she reached out to me one day and she said, "Hey, I'm going to a women's empowerment weekend really close to your house, and I have an extra ticket. Do you want to come?" And I didn't really want to go, honestly, because again, I was numb and angry, you know, but I really wanted to be around her because she felt like I was with him,
Mm.
and so I really like yearned for that connection. And so I agreed to go. And it happened to be, and I don't know if you know her, but I love this girl, Lori Harder, had these women's empowerment weekends called the Bliss Project. And that's what the event was. And I think it was only like her second one. And it was really fabulous. And I got to spend so much time with Rebecca, and I got to talk about my brother, which is kind of uncomfortable for some other people, but not for her. And, I got to meet some really wonderful women, but everyone at that event kept talking about like breakthroughs, like, oh, at Lori's last event, I had this major breakthrough, or like, oh my gosh, I wonder when I'm going to have this breakthrough. And I was there to spend time with Rebecca. Bliss Weekend was just the vehicle. And again, remember, I was angry inside. So every time someone would bring up a breakthrough, I was like, kind of like internally rolling my eyes, which now I realize it's really mean, but that's how I was then. And I would roll my eyes and I'm like, what are these people talking about? Breakthroughs, And I went the whole weekend and I didn't feel a breakthrough. I had a great time, but I was like, I don't know what these breakthroughs are. And this is the part where I think is really important, that like post-traumatic transformation that happens, you never know when that happens. Some people, it's right away where they're like, oh my gosh, like this is my growth, this is my journey, this is my opportunity to like make sense of my trauma that I've been through and build something really beautiful out of it, and like turn it around from something that's going to haunt me for the rest of my life to something that's going to like give joy and love to the world in some way. And
Yeah.
it was the end of that. It was the end of that weekend, and there was a yoga session. And I'm not a yogi, but I was like, fine, I'll stretch, whatever. And I went to the yoga session, and I don't remember the yoga instructor's name, but she is single-handedly responsible for pulling away that cloud of grief that was just blinding me from
Mm.
everything. And we were like at the end of the yoga session, and this is gonna sound very weird, but I have this book here. She pulls out this book by Dr. Seuss, Oh, the Places You'll Go. Okay. I had no idea when she pulled out this book that this book was written about me. It really was. Like, I saw myself in this book, and I was in some yoga pose. I forget which one, but she got to this page. And if you don't mind, I want to read it for you because
Please.
I feel like everyone's read this book, but
Yeah.
maybe not as an adult. And it really like crosses generations, I feel like. And I feel like it speaks to a lot of people's lives. And
Mm-hmm.
she gets to this place where it says, you can get so confused that you'll start in to race down long wiggled roads at a breaknecking pace and grind on for miles across weirdish wild space, headed, I fear, toward a most useless place, the waiting place.
Mm.
And that really, and then on into the story, which, I'm not going to waste your time with it, but that really spoke to me in my heart because I felt like it had now been 5 or 6 years where I stopped living. Like I was just going through my days numb and angry, and I forgot to live. And I was in that waiting place and I didn't know what I was waiting for. And I started just bawling in that yoga class. And that was my breakthrough. I couldn't believe it. You know, everything that I had like rolled up my eyes at, I'm like, oh my God, it's now happening to me. And that's really when I realized like my experience that I went through is so much bigger than my trauma. There's like this gift in there that I need to really grasp onto and live my life by it. And I need to take my brother's legacy and his death and make some sense out of it because it made no sense.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, you
that's
can't make sense of any of this.
no.
And geez, Talla, like everything that you're saying, I'm just like, oh my gosh, I could talk to you forever about this. I feel like there's just the amount of courage and wisdom that you just shared with us is just, it's mind blowing. And, you know, going back even where you're talking about just this power of love, you know, between two people and how that can have such a healing effect. And he was able to stretch 2 weeks into a year and a half. And the power of, you know, his courage, the way he died and what you were able to even witness and how that even helped you let him go. I mean, that's a whole other gift you have to bring to this world. How do you say goodbye to somebody? And as you said, you were learning from him as he was dying.
Yeah.
I don't think that we know, especially in this country, how to deal with that. Nobody really teaches us that. And there's so much, as there should be, you know, especially if you feel like there's been an injustice done, which, you know, and saying goodbye to somebody, even when you feel like it's not just and it could have been prevented or all these things. And how do you still, in those moments with your brother while he's still alive, love him and learn from him and let it be as beautiful as it possibly can be.
Yeah.
And that anger, oh boy, I feel you on that one. I just know how I felt after my diagnosis. And I can imagine having, you know, if that had been even compounded by having a loss of life in that situation too, because it took me years to understand why I was so angry, because I didn't identify as an angry person. I didn't realize that I had rage inside me. And I was mad and I couldn't even express to people why I was so mad and so angry because I didn't even know why. I was like, why would I be so mad about this? And it wasn't even until maybe a year or so ago I was able to say why. And it was what I now call my intuitive rage at just the injustice of it all. Like, how was this possible? How is it that somebody even like me, who's totally supported, feeling this unsupported? Our world is just not set up for this. We are so unprepared for this. And so much of it could possibly have been prevented or at least done better, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And why we're not doing that and how it's impacting lives. And, you know, for me, I'm looking at young mothers, you know, and how unsupported they are in this world. And, you know, they should just also be able to get over it and get on with their lives. And it just, yeah, it blows my mind. And so now I've been able to identify, oh, that was just intuitive rage. I knew I was really upset about a lot of things. And now I use that. That's what I was passionate about. Those were the
Right.
things that I cared about. But in the moment, I was just mad. This can't be
Right.
happening now. I've got kids to raise.
Exactly. It's like you feel like life has let you down, and it's something that you just kind of, you trust that life does not let you down. Like you just kind of blindly trust that you're going to live a long and happy and healthy life, and you're going to die of old age one day when you're, I don't know, like in your 90s. But
Right. That's the
so you
plan.
get down. Yeah, it's like that fairy tale life dream, you know. And I think that people like you and people like me, people like my mother, you know, I read in psychology today that a third to one half of people who go through like an epic traumatic period in their life, only a third to a half of them will find growth after that, will find like a meaning or something that they want to do with it, turn it into something positive after that. And at first, when I read that, I thought to myself, wow, that's a really small percentage. But then I was like, well, 50%, like half of the people that have undergone trauma, they like make something beautiful out of it. And all the nonprofits and the charities and, Love Talla, or the way my mom decided to make sense of her trauma and do something good with it was to become a social worker, to help people. And then I look at other people in my family, like my father, and he was in the other, half, where he's probably in the waiting place still, and he'll probably be in the waiting place for the rest of his life. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It was just my like eye-opening to read about that. I didn't know about that.
Yeah. And I think of those people in the waiting place too, and just send them so much compassion, because for them, that's getting very emotional here. But
Yeah.
for them, that's the safest place.
Yeah, because you don't have to feel.
Yeah.
Feeling it all is very difficult. And one of the things that I didn't expect in launching Love Talla and my fingerprint necklaces was that I had to relive 10 years of my grief. And I almost had to go, I did, I went back. I went back to those times, and it was really difficult. So like, I understand why half of the people don't want to go through that, because it's really, really difficult. Even writing the chapter in our book, A Conscious Way Forward, like I just cried, and I'm sure you did too. Cried and cried and cried through that. Like I couldn't even see the letters on my screen because I was just crying through it. But you get through it because it's bigger than you. Whatever your goal is and whatever gift you can find in that trauma that you went through, it's bigger than you, and you gotta go through it. You gotta make yourself uncomfortable so you could have that growth. So then you can live a life that like your sibling that was robbed of his can appreciate and live through you. And that's really my ultimate goal. Like I want his legacy to live on through me. And I couldn't do that when I was numb and angry and in the waiting place,
Absolutely. And that is again just such a gift to be able to talk about him and keep that story alive in you and of him, and to celebrate his life that way. And I think that's really a powerful takeaway, because he would have done anything to live another day, and he did, right, for as long as he could. And so what are we doing with our beautiful gift of life every day?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
It's, I just had a birthday, and every year, some people think, oh, I'm growing older, like, oh, bummer, I'm 41 now. A lot of women are like, oh, I'm in my 40s, what a bummer. But I see it as such a privilege to be able to blow out 41 candles on a cake,
I know, me too. Oh, I so get that. And happy birthday. I love watching you celebrate. And the same as me. I mean, I remember watching women, just like everybody has, their own ideas about age. But I saw somebody a few years ago celebrating their 50th birthday and like very proudly proclaiming her age. And I was like, oh my God, I will never tell anybody when I'm 50. And this year, same as you, I was like, I turned 50, and I'm like, everybody knows I'm 50 because I'm so happy to be here. It's a gift.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm one of those people now proudly proclaiming my age.
Yep, exactly.
But I think we could all use a little bit more of that. I'm so happy for every day that I get to be here. And
yeah, I feel the same way.
So tell me, Talla, about the beautiful art that you create now, these gorgeous necklaces and the stories that they tell, and how that even developed, because it is just watching your stories and the way you create them, like I had no idea so much went into them. And, a clue here is that it involves fingerprints, and even watching you do the artwork on the fingerprints and telling the stories behind the fingerprints, it's really, there's so much that goes into it. It is beautiful. It is more than just a keepsake. And if you would just share a little bit about that, I would love to hear.
Yeah, the idea was really born 10 years ago when, anyone who's been through like the funeral home process of planning end of life stuff for their beautiful human beings, it's a weird and wonderful process. And usually the people who are running the funeral homes are the kindest and nicest people. I think you have to be, because you're just dealing with so much heaviness at that point in anyone's life. But I remember being at the funeral home and leaving, and they handed me this packet, and I was like, what is this? Again, it's like that file folder they handed you, like they hand you paperwork. And I just happened to open it and look inside. And that's when I was introduced to fingerprint jewelry. Fingerprint jewelry is very well known in the grief world. It is not well known in the rest of the world. And at the time when I was handed this brochure with really beautiful pictures of fingerprint jewelry, I looked inside a little more carefully at the packet, and I pulled out a piece of paper that had my brother's fingerprints stamped onto it. And that piece of paper became the most valuable thing I ever owned, because it was a way for me to touch him again. Like I imagine, this was 10 years ago. So they were actually taking his finger, putting it in ink and stamping it on the paper. And in my mind, I'm like, he touched this paper. Like this paper is like a gift, and I will cherish it for the rest of my life. And in that moment, when I saw that it was something like fingerprint jewelry was available, so that they could replicate that fingerprint onto jewelry where you can actually be holding your loved one's hand wherever you are, I knew that not only did I want this kind of jewelry, but I needed it for my healing. I needed it to feel closer to him. I needed to like feel a part of his body again, and I realize this sounds creepy to a lot of people. I get that.
Beautiful.
I always say there's two types of people in this world: the kind who finds fingerprint jewelry creepy, and the kind who gets it, and I've met a lot of people who get it, and I really wanted a necklace. But my problem was that I couldn't find a style that represented how amazing my brother was. Like all of the styles were very obvious, like death necklaces is what I like to call them. They were like angel wings enveloping an oval, and I just didn't want it to be so in my face, I guess. I just wanted it to be subtle and something that was special to me, that I knew what it was.
Right.
And so I put the idea aside, and I never forgot about it. And I just kept thinking about it. And throughout the years, I kept checking to see if anyone had come up with something cuter that I would wear to honor Amir. And 10 years later, Lisa, nobody did. And I decided for myself, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to be the person who designs something for myself. I wasn't even thinking of it as like a business. But through the process of designing it, I just felt like it wasn't right that this type of beautiful jewelry was only reserved for remembrance. I felt like it should be mainstream. It should also be to celebrate people who are here with you, like your kids, and to like use it to like cherish certain memories at the moment in your life when you ordered that necklace, or to have it be like part of your healing process when you've gone through something. Like it can be used in such a multitude of ways. And that was really the reason why I decided to actually make it a business, because I thought this could touch so many more hearts than just the bereaved, even though we really needed it. Yeah. I just felt like it was a beautiful piece of jewelry for so many different people. And one of the things that I could have never, ever, ever predicted was how special it has become for dog moms, how
Oh,
special it has become for sisters and
mm,
best friends and sweethearts. It's just from what I thought it was going to be when I launched the business last March. It hasn't even been a year yet.
oh, really? Oh, wow.
Yeah. To
That's
what it is
amazing.
now it's really blown my mind. And the amount of joy and the beautiful stories. Oh my goodness. The beautiful stories that I have heard from people who are creating these necklaces for themselves. It's really been fulfilling.
Mm,
And I feel like it's such a perfect way for Amir's legacy to live on, is to bring this joy and remembrance and celebration and healing and connectedness to people,
mhm.
where, that just felt right to me. It felt like
Yeah.
something that he would have wanted to come out of his life.
Yeah. Oh, I would so agree with that and celebrate that with you, because just witnessing you over this last year, I had no idea the company was that new, honestly, and what you have created in that short amount of time. Of course, it had been incubating for a while, but it
Yes.
has so much life to it now and has already told so many beautiful stories and captured them in this beautiful piece of art. And the fact that you're creating it with so much love and passion and joy is just, I can imagine what a piece like that would feel to have and to wear, and how just what a gift to the people that are receiving it, and to your brother's legacy. Just incredible, Talla.
And to be totally honest, these people are an amazing gift to me, because every, you know, text message, call, DM, every email I get just lets me know that I've done the right thing. I've gone
Mhm.
down the right path. The universe gave me no other choice than to do this, but now I know that it was the right thing to do.
Yeah, yeah, you're transforming people's grief and their connection or their celebration or their honoring in a way, and they want to be able to have their stories heard, and they want to be able to have that connection, and just that you get it so well. Of course, what a gift, and the world needs that type of healing and that type of love. And I can imagine just the people that get to work with you. I'm already racking my brain. I'm like, okay, well, what could I do? What's some of this? It's so beautiful. I love watching your work, and just what you share online. And I'm sure it goes even so much more in depth than that, and the stories that you get to tell. I just know that you're transforming lives and stories, and creating something so beautiful out of it.
Thank you, Lisa. The feeling is very mutual. I love
Mm,
seeing
you
you and
are
what you're doing as
quickly
well.
becoming one of my superheroes. I'm already like got our next conversation planned out. There's so much wisdom in you, and you are just such a gift and a blessing to know. And I'm so excited to have crossed paths with you, and get to be in your world and learn from you, and just see where this goes. We're just getting to know each other, but I feel like this will be a long lasting friendship, and so happy to be able to support your work, and share your story and learn more about your brother and the gift of his message and his life, because he no doubt was just a wonderful human. Getting to be able to know Rebecca and you, and the impact that his 30 years had in his lifetime is just astounding to me, and a testament to how we just never know the
Yeah.
impact that we're having on people, and how our lives are going to go. And when I talk about our sacred purpose, the name of this podcast, it isn't always about what we're doing, right? It's, you never know how long this life is going to be, and how you're going to fulfill that legacy of your purpose. And to see somebody who at such a young age, you see that legacy still having impact years later. And that's really what this is all about. And so I'm so
Yeah.
grateful to have you sharing that with us today, because
And
that's really really what we're here for.
Thank you, Lisa. And I'm really, I mean, the privilege to be on your podcast and to have a platform to talk about these things and to represent my siblings in grief and to be able to, share a little bit about what we go through that's different from other people has been really, it's been really wonderful. Thank you so much, Lisa.
Oh my gosh, such a gift, because I'm blessed with 5 siblings, and I'm grateful that they are all with me, but I cannot imagine a loss like that. I
Yeah.
really can't. I think, like you said, I would die.
Yeah.
I don't know how you draw your next breath after that. It would be unimaginable for me, literally.
Yes.
So tell me what's next for Love Talla.
Oh gosh, really? What's next is I just I'm such a new and I'm like such a baby company. Just really want to touch as many lives as I possibly can. Something that I found, Rebecca always tells me I should write a book about my life. And honestly, I don't think it's that interesting that I could write a whole book about it. But what I've come to learn from creating these beautiful pieces of jewelry and having a jewelry line that's like really just all about storytelling. It's very personal, it's personalized, it represents somebody really deeply meaningful to you, whomever that person or fur baby is. The stories that I have been hearing from people have really ignited kind of this desire in me to maybe think about writing a book, not about myself, but do you remember those like chicken soup for the Philip
Yes.
soul? Like
Mm-hmm.
something like that,
Yeah.
where almost something like what you're doing or what I spoke about today, like that post-traumatic growth. Like, how beautiful would it be to create a book about people who have gone through like a similar situation and what they have built from it, not necessarily all like businesses and nonprofits and stuff, but like anything, like a mindset change or like anything positive. I think me personally, I like to create things that I want to have, things that I see missing in the marketplace. I think, oh, well, if I want it, then someone else would want it too. And if I can take something positive from it, someone else will too. And we'll just continue down that like domino effect of positivity. So that's one of the things that I've been kind of ruminating on. And then the other thing is, and I touched on it in the beginning of our conversation, was having a giving aspect of the business. Like new businesses, it takes a while to be,
absolutely
sustain yourself or keep the lights on. And I'm still in the portion of my business where I'm trying to keep the lights on, but I feel this really intense calling to give. And I think that one of the things that I'm so passionate about is, again, like young people and the medical field, and giving them the ability to like, have support behind them to figure out what's going on with their health like that. I've been looking at a lot of charities that are kind of like wrapped around that to see if I could have a giving component to Love Talla. And I think that would, for some reason, I just feel my brother smiling down on me when he sees me thinking about that.
Oh yeah, I have no doubt you'll find a beautiful organization to partner with and even spread his legacy even further. I love that. That's definitely my jam as part of building a business model. So I'm so grateful to have you touch on that, because I think that there is so much impact, even just sharing the stories of another organization, whether or not you're giving financially. There's so many ways to, as a nonprofit owner, I know how much I love when somebody's sharing our stories and our work. And so I always want to encourage people that it can be more than a financial contribution. Your energy and helping them get their message out is also so valuable. So I know that's on your roadmap and in your heart. And when you find the right one, it'll be incredible and beautiful. And so happy that that's even something that you're considering and feeling called to do, because it's really just the way we continue to let that impact ripple out beyond what we can imagine.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I know whatever is in store for me, whatever my soul agreement was before I came onto this earth, I know that it'll just all fall into place, because I've got an angel up there kind of steering the ship. So I know he's going to steer it to the right place, and I'm just kind of his vehicle.
I love that. What a beautiful insight to land on. Wow, I've got goosebumps all over, Talla. You are just such a gift, such a bright spark of inspiration, and a testament for transforming, alchemizing grief into something really beautiful. And the way you were able to really dive into that pain and that anger and find the jewel in it, and really let it transform you, and have that breakthrough on the yoga mat, which I know so many people can relate to. I think that's where it often happens in our bodies, when we finally let our body soften and let some of that come out. I know that's where it happened for me, and I know so many other people, that when the time is right, there's so much truth and wisdom in your body, and when we're open to it, that's where we'll let so much come through. And I'm so grateful for you sharing all of that with us today. What a gift. And I have no doubt that you'll be back, because I've already got so many more questions.
It was hard. It was hard to organize my thoughts on what I wanted to talk to you about, and talk to, the people listening to your beautiful podcast about. But yeah, it's like peeling back the onion. There's just so many layers that could be thought-provoking and helpful and just relatable to so many people out there. So I would love to come back whenever you want to have me.
Yes, I love that. I'm so happy to have you here with me. It's an honor to have you tuning in each week. I want you to know that no matter where you're at, and no matter what transition you're facing, you are supported and loved. You are whole, and you are more than capable as you are in this moment. You always have been. If you're ready to lean into a life of purpose, clarity, and joy through sisterhood, ritual, and intention, join us in the Connected Circle. Consider us your soul squad of women navigating all the transitions of life together. To join now, head over to my website, lisamalia.co, and join the Connected Circle at the very top of the page. I'll see you there. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this show, please share, subscribe, rate, and write a review. This helps the goddess of the algorithm guide other incredible people to find this show, and supports the work we do here. It really does make a difference, and I would be so grateful. With all my love, have a beautiful day.